Dana White announced yesterday that Dustin Poirier will be taking on Benoit Saint-Denis in a 5-round co-main event fight for UFC 299 in Miami. And you got to give Dustin Poirier credit here. I was a bit skeptical if Poirier would be willing to do the sort of the Justin Gaethje thing, which is fight an up-and-coming prospect. And Poirier's doing it. So before we even get into this breakdown and I give you my thoughts on this fight, Poirier's got to get some respect. I've heard a lot of fans kind of trash him and say he's holding up the rankings and all these different things. He's fighting arguably the toughest guy at lightweight, not holding the belt, not named Islam Makhachev, in my opinion. I think Benoit Saint-Denis, I mean, talk about a monster 2023 for that guy. He looked outstanding this entire year, and now he gets a huge opportunity fighting Dustin Poirier, who, Poirier gets a win here. He is right back in the saddle, and it's one of those things that I think, Poirier kind of needed to do if his ambition is going back and fighting for a title. And this is the type of matchup that sort of signals that. And, Gaethje had to do the same thing fighting Fiziev. So full credit to Dustin Poirier for taking this fight. It could have been a lack of options too, but regardless, he's still got, he did decide to take this fight, and it's going to be taking place. The only thing I wonder is why is this 5 rounds? They just announced Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan. That's 3 rounds. That seems like a fight that should be 5 rounds with it being title implications. I mean, obviously a win here for Poirier would certainly, put him back in the contenders conversation. But listen, I'm not complaining it's 5 rounds. I'm glad it's 5 rounds, but I also wonder why this is 5 rounds and Arman and Charles isn't. And if you missed that video, I did a video already on Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan. But anyways, excited for this matchup. Makes total sense. Like at this point, what are you getting with Dustin Poirier, right? He's had opportunities at fighting for a title. He needs to be fighting the up and comers, and inserts Benoit Saint-Denis, which is going to be a great matchup. And, you look at this on paper and it's a phenomenal matchup. Poirier 29-8, Benoit Saint-Denis 13-1, 35 years old for Poirier, 28 for Saint-Denis. So Saint-Denis arguably not even in his prime yet. 5'9" to 5'11", 73 apiece. So Benoit Saint-Denis going to be a little bit taller here. They have the same reach. Obviously, Poirier's fought the who's who. Biggest step up in Saint-Denis' career. Saint-Denis coming off a win over Matt Frevola in his last fight. I mean, let's start with him actually, because he had a good 2023. The Frevola one was great, but the big one for me was Thiago Moises. We've seen Moises get in there with guys like Islam and so many other fighters in the lightweight division, and he just destroyed Thiago Moises. Like, I was a bit skeptical of Saint-Denis going into that fight, and he proved me wrong. That was the fight for me. I was like, okay, no questions anymore about this guy. He is an absolute threat in this division, and you just look at what he's been able to do. And, by the way, his one loss in the UFC, his one loss his entire career, short notice fight against Zaleski, up a weight class, in which he took a ton of damage and didn't get finished. That's another asset for Saint-Denis, I think, in this fight, even with it being 5 rounds. He's tough to take out. So Poirier's got to prepare himself for 5 rounds in this fight, I think, because I think it's going to be extremely tough to finish Benoit Saint-Denis. But, Saint-Denis' run can't be denied here. Sorry, I forgot that Bonfim fight was also last year. So that's 3 straight wins, all finishes. He absolutely deserves this opportunity. And Benoit Saint-Denis has become one of my favorite fighters to watch. And you just look at what he's been able to do, a well-deserved opportunity here for Saint-Denis. Now, on the flip side, Poirier had a prime opportunity in his last fight against Justin Gaethje to get back in the title talks. And he ended up losing that fight, got head kick knocked out in the second round. Full credit to Gaethje. Great game plan coming in there, avenging that loss to Poirier the first time and getting it done. He had a good performance against Michael Chandler before that, and then obviously dropped the title fight to Charles Oliveira and had a couple wins over McGregor and Dan Hooker. So, I mean, Poirier was kind of, going back towards, that title shot again, I think, with the fact that he got the Chandler win and then the Gaethje fight, the way he lost that fight, very devastating fashion. There were a lot of questions about Poirier. Would he move up to 170? But again, you got to give Poirier credit here for fighting a really dangerous guy here in Benoit Saint-Denis, which is going to be interesting. Now, as far as a pick goes in this fight, I already see people saying, oh yeah, Benoit Saint-Denis, easy. I don't know. I think this is going to be close. I think this is going to be a very close fight. Now, obviously Poirier's 35 and he's getting up there a bit in age, and we did see him get brutally knocked out in his last fight. But here's the thing with Poirier, at lightweight anyways, forget about featherweight, he's tough to finish. Right? Oliveira had to submit him in their fight, right? I believe that was a submission, not a knockout loss, right? So he got submitted there. The only other guy to knock out Dustin Poirier was Michael Johnson back in 2016. So we got Michael Johnson, and then we've got Justin Gaethje as the only 2 guys to knock out Dustin Poirier in the last couple of years. Poirier's pretty tough, and he's fought guys like Conor that have knockout power. In fact, Conor actually got a couple good shots off in both of their fights, and Poirier was still standing. So that's going to be interesting if Saint Denis can't finish this, because we know that's what this guy does. He goes out there and he doesn't like getting, paid by the hour. 69% of his wins are by submission for sure. He's also got 31% by knockouts. He never goes the distance. So that's where things get interesting here. He's fighting a guy in Poirier. Yes, I know Oliveira and Khabib submitted him, but we're talking about two of the greatest lightweights of all time. Saint Denis is not in that caliber yet. Maybe he gets there eventually, but I think that's what makes it interesting. Can Saint Denis finish Poirier, or is Poirier tough enough? Because you look at who Poirier's fought. I mean, this is the top of the top in the division. Hooker's maybe the last opponent that's ranked a little bit lower here. We're talking about a number of, either former champions, current champions, guys ranked high, and he's done quite well. Let's also not forget about the win over Max Holloway, which I know Holloway moved up a weight class for that, but that's still a good win here. I'm curious to see how this goes. Like, it's a great opportunity for Poirier here to prove that he's still a contender in the weight class, and I think this is the perfect opponent to do so. And like I said, I'm curious to see what the odds are too, because I think Saint Denis will be the favorite. But I certainly think Poirier has got something to prove here if he wants to still go on a quest for a title. This, to me, by Poirier accepting this fight, it tells me that he's interested in trying to make another run at the title. Because if he didn't want to make a run at the title, there's much easier opponents to fight than Benoit Saint Denis. I think this is very interesting that Poirier took this fight, and you got to give him full credit, like I said, because, again, there's not a lot of people putting their hand up going, yeah, I'd like to fight this guy. I'd like to fight this guy who just completely destroyed, Thiago Moises a couple fights ago, completely knocked out Matt Frevola in the first round. Bonfim got a good win there. Like, this is a really, really dangerous fighter and a guy that does not look like he's slowing down. So as far as a pick goes, I am going to side with Saint Denis. I am going to sort of lean on the side of Poirier declining a bit. And you got to think of the damage that Poirier has taken too in his career, right? Like, I'm not even talking losses necessarily, because he doesn't have like a ton of losses. It's just the fact that he's been in wars. Remember the Hooker fight? Connor's taken some shots there. Khabib. He's been in there with some of the best, right? I mean, I even forgot about the Alvarez fights too, right? Like, so, or just the one Alvarez fight. Sorry, I was getting that mixed up. But you kind of get where I'm going with this, is that he's fought far better competition. He's got a lot of miles on him. And we're talking about a guy who made his MMA debut in May of 2009. Saint Denis started a lot later than that, right? He started 2019. So Poirier started his professional MMA career 10 years before Dustin Poirier did, around there, right? So it just goes to show, how many miles have been on Poirier at this point too. So we'll see. Maybe that'll help him. Maybe that experience will pay dividends in a 5-round fight, or maybe it's the sign of a decline here for Poirier. We'll have to see, but this is a great fight. I mean, look, this should really be on UFC 300, and I'm going to have a video coming out here shortly as to why I think that might be, but good matchmaking here by the UFC. If you've got a former title challenger who's, maybe lost a key fight, in the case of Poirier losing to Gaethje, you give him an up-and-comer and you see if he still belongs there. We've seen, again, flipping this around, we saw Gaethje in that matchup with Fiziev. Does he still have enough to prove that he's a contender? Well, he clearly does, because he beat Fiziev in that fight, right? Poirier now has the same opportunity here to beat Benoit Saint Denis, because if he beats Benoit Saint Denis, he's going to get back in that conversation of fighting guys in that top 5. But for now, he steps outside that. He fights a very dangerous opponent here in Saint Denis, and we'll see what ends up happening here. With it being 5 rounds, I could see Saint Denis finishing Poirier. I know I talked about Poirier's durability and how tough he is, but I could see it if it goes later. If Saint Denis is able to connect a number of times in this fight, I could see him just slowly wearing down Poirier. But I'll tell you what, guys, I am not counting out Dustin Poirier in this fight. I think there will be a lot of people saying, oh, Saint Denis destroys him. Yeah, it's easy to do that when you're fighting competition that's not Dustin Poirier, when you're fighting guys like, and nothing against the guys that Saint Denis fought, but I think we fixate too much on the finish and not on the level of opposition. To me, Poirier's fought far better guys. I'm not completely counting him out of this fight, but if I got to pick someone, I got to pick the guy in Saint Denis, because I just think Saint Denis looks like the real deal. That's really what it boils down to for me. If this was a case of, like, I don't know, a fighter that, if this was like Paddy Pimblett fighting Poirier, then obviously I'm going to think much differently, because Paddy hasn't looked that good. Saint Denis has, and he's done so against, maybe not the best opposition, but he's destroyed those opponents. That's the difference. Paddy's not doing that to his opponents. Saint Denis is. So that's kind of where I see a difference there between the two fighters. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. A couple things. Number 1, were you surprised to see Poirier take this fight? Number 2, does this fight make sense? Number 3, what's your prediction? How do you see it going down? And number 4, were you surprised to see this not on UFC 300? And actually, we'll add one more in here. Are you surprised to see this 5 rounds? Again, not complaining about it being 5 rounds. I just think that UFC is a bit weird about where they choose to do their 5-round fights. This doesn't seem like one that necessarily should be 5 rounds, but I'm not complaining either, getting those extra 2 rounds. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. Appreciate you tuning in. I'm James Lynch. I'll see you next time.